What was radicalizing, very shocking and very disturbing for me was the city of Moscow, where I'd never been, the biggest city in Europe, 13 million people. And it is so much nicer than any city in my country. I had no idea. My father spent a lot of time there in the 80s when he worked for the US government and barely had electricity. And now it is so much cleaner and safer and prettier aesthetically. It's architecture, it's food, it's service than any country, city in the United States that you have to, and this is not.
Yeah, that is 100% true. I completely agree with that statement. So, всем привет, ребята! What is going on, guys? So, my name is Matthew, это мой YouTube канал, this is my YouTube channel, and today I'm going to speak about my personal experiences in Russia and Eastern Europe, and whether or not you should visit, is it safe, should you actually trust the news, what is going on over there from my own personal experiences. So, hey, before we get into this video, this is from my own personal experiences, so I would not necessarily base any decision you do off of me. This is just what I have personally encountered. And it's also difficult for me to say what is going on exactly in the current situation. I still do have connections over there. However, I visited Russia in 2020, and obviously, unless you've been living under a rock in the meantime, things have changed drastically. So, what are my thoughts? Is Russia a safe country to visit? So, when I visited Russia, the first thing that kind of shocked me is just the way everything is displayed, especially on the news, or what I like to call fear porn. On the fear porn, that it was this like super dangerous axis of evil. And I guess before I get into this, I don't like the idea of living in fear. I refuse to live in fear. If I want to go somewhere, I will go there and I will visit it, regardless necessarily of what the risks are. I can say that Russia in whole, I thought was very safe when I went there. I had zero issues when I went through it. I mean, it's kind of a pain in the butt when you get in, and this video is not about how to get a visa or anything like that. And actually, in fact, I recorded a video yesterday on this topic, but it was way too long, and I just want to sum up in, like a 5-10 minute video if I can, basically what everything was like. So, I didn't have any issues getting through passport control or anything like that. I have seen some vlogs of people since then, especially now after the whole sanctions and Ukraine thing, that they have been taken in for questioning. My personal suggestion is, unless you have like Russian connections, even if you are fluent in the language, I would go with some sort of tour group or an official tour. A couple of reasons for this. A, being that they can help you need like a voucher to get into Russia to get a visa, some sort of sponsor or something like that. A lot of hotels do that, but now with the sanctions and everything, and you're not able to use credit cards, I would just go through a tourist company. I have a friend, Andreas, that leads tours out of the country of Georgia into southern Russia, Dagestan, that area. An Austrian guy, really nice guy. I met him in person about a year ago. Cannot recommend him enough. But he leads tours of Western tourists. They all go to the border together. They go through the border. I asked him what the border process was like. He's like, dude, zero issues at all. It's pretty smooth. He has a Russian wife. He has a lot of connections over there, obviously. I will link him down in the description below, but that is an example of exactly what I'm talking about here. People that are used to dealing with Western tourists, they're used to having to deal with sanctions, they know how to navigate everything legally, and they know what to do and what not to do. So, number one recommendation is I wouldn't go full bald and bankrupt and just run off to Russia by yourself, especially if you haven't been there, if you don't have any experience before. If you go with like a guided tour group with a company that's specialized with Western tourists, then yes, I would strongly recommend you visit. So, perceptions on Russia. In a nutshell, Moscow and St. Petersburg were absolutely stunning, beautiful, safe, clean cities. I didn't see graffiti. I didn't see homelessness. I didn't see beggars. It was very well kept and orderly. And actually, in fact, out of all the countries I've been to, Germany, Netherlands, Austria, I've been to quite a few European countries at this point, I can honestly say that Moscow and St. Petersburg are by far my favorite cities in all of Europe, and honestly, probably the world. Just the opposite of American cities, so like whatever your stereotype of like an Atlanta or a Chicago is, they're complete 180 opposite. So again, if you can go into those cities, for example, you might not necessarily need a tour guide. If you want to do, I know in Estonia, you can walk across the border from Narva and get a bus to St. Petersburg. Again, with sanctions and everything, this channel is not how to get around sanctions. So, from what I understand, you're not allowed to bring euros in. But again, I don't think there's anything like that with US dollars. So you should be okay. But I would definitely check and make sure that you are following the rules strictly. And a lot of the issues that have happened with Americans and Westerners that have been imprisoned or whatnot in Russia is because they did not follow the Russian rules. So don't be an idiot. You will get punished. They don't care that you are necessarily American. So that would be my first recommendation. A big thing that really stuck out to me, though, was Russian people are just normal people. And again, when you read the news and all this stuff, it's like you have this like image of, you know, what Russian people are like, this like negative stereotype, and that is not necessarily true. They're just normal, good, most of them good, hardworking people that just try to live day to day. That is what I ran into, and I honestly, even today, I guarantee you that's exactly what you are going to run into. So as far as, oh, you can't go there, it's scary, blah, blah, the people, this and that, it's a military dictatorship, like, the people themselves, the actual people that make up the country, a majority of the people are just good, honest, hardworking people. Doesn't mean they all are, and that's not the case for any country at all. You know, there's not a single country that's, like, completely perfect. So don't get that misconstrued. I will say the countryside is a little bit more of what Americans would think of, like, Central America. Like a Honduras or a Mexico or something like that. It's not third world. It's not like you're going through the Congo, but things are beaten down a bit more. They're not necessarily as nice. Again, everything's super cheap over there, so that is one nice thing, especially if you go out in the provinces. And again, don't just take my word for it. You can watch videos of people, even today, going through some of these areas in Russia, and you can actually see what it's like yourself. The problem is describing Russia in one short video is very difficult because it's such a huge, gigantic country. It's by far the biggest country in the world. And even Siberia alone is, what, like 3-4 times the size of Alaska or something crazy like that. There's so many different cultures and religions and languages, and just to summarize what it is. So this video is mostly going to be focused on stereotypical European Moscow, St. Petersburg type Russia. And that's my thoughts towards them. If you're really into, for example, if you go to St. Petersburg, there's a lot of the stuff with the Romanov dynasty and all that. You can go to Petergolf, the Winter Palace. You can visit that, the Summer Palace. Same thing in Moscow, St. Basil's Cathedral. I respect the fact that they preserve their Soviet heritage, even though they have abandoned that many years ago. So you can still see a lot of the old like Soviet railroad stations. It's still the Red Square, Krasnaya Ploshad, like it's still there. The whole, you know, Lenin Mausoleum, like that's still there. Like statues of all that. I mean, they did go through a de-Stalinization period, which is, again, he was a mass murder fanatic. But they still preserve their Soviet history, and that is something that I do respect, even though, again, like I said, you know, they have since, for a long time, have changed their ideology. So that is something I like about it, and St. Petersburg, I feel like, is a perfect blend of that, because you get that, but you also get all the Russian Empire, if you're really into history, and then you get the modern Russia, and I think a good picture of what I'm trying to say is what I'm going to show on the screen right here. They had a ceremony displaying the 3 flags of the Russian Empire, Russian Federation, and the Soviet Union in St. Petersburg, and these are huge flags. And in my mind, that is literally what that city encompasses. It's just a gigantic history book, pretty much. It's like you're walking through a history book. So I really enjoyed it. Now, I will say I do have a friend that has left Russia, and I asked him a few months ago in a text message, and actually let me quote exactly what he said so I don't misconstrue anything about what his thoughts were if I tried to go back to Russia. I would say, and I quote, I would say that the risks are low, but they exist. My general recommendation would be to wait until events are over, plus or minus a few months. It is too unpredictable as I feel it. Today, it is more or less fine, and after a week, everything may go wild. And he basically told me it is kind of a 50-50. So if you do plan on going to, especially a non-tourist part of Russia by yourself, that is what my Russian friend has told me. So I will refer to him, I guess, because I haven't been there since 2020. But as far as my personal time there, I mean, almost every negative stereotype that I've had of Russia has completely dissipated. It is a very beautiful country. Again, Moscow and St. Petersburg, even today, I think if you went as a solo tourist, you shouldn't have too many issues. But that is just my own personal feeling. If you really want to be safe, I would get a hold of somebody like an Andreas that literally specializes in this type of thing, and that would probably be your best bet. So for a couple minutes, I guess I will speak about my thoughts on the rest of Eastern Europe. So I have not been, I'm going to assume Belarus is pretty similar to Russia, just from the people that I know that have been there. I have not been to the Baltic countries at all, so it's difficult for me to say and I have not been to any of the other, I guess, EU parts of Eastern Europe, for example, like a Poland, I have not been to, so I can't really say. I have been to Georgia and Armenia. I do have some friends in the stands, and I guess piecing together between my experiences in the Caucasus as well as some of the people that I know that have been in the stands, Central Asia part of the ex-Soviet Union, I will say it is kind of viewed, I was talking about how in between Moscow and St. Petersburg, it's almost like a Mexico or like a Honduras or something. I would say probably even step that back a little bit, not a notch, and that's kind of what the rest of, I would say, the ex-Soviet bloc is like, the non-EU part of it. That's just my own personal thoughts on it. But it's hard for me we're talking about the ex-Soviet Union as 15 countries. So it's hard for me to stereotype what they're all like in a few sentences. That's just kind of what the consensus is in my mind. Georgia, I thought was very dirty. I did enjoy it. The food's absolutely amazing. Again, there's a lot of people trying to rip you off. That's something I ran into. I actually preferred Armenia a lot more. Armenia was a lot more Middle Eastern. It was kind of like what I would imagine going to like a Christian version of like an Iran, maybe. I know that sounds kind of weird. That might even sound wrong. Maybe like a Christian version of like Saudi Arabia, if that kind of sounds right. It was like almost like Middle Eastern Moscow, more deserty, mountainy, but everything was super clean. The people were amazing. We didn't really have too many people trying to rip us off at all. Again, prices were dirt cheap, so I loved Armenia. I mean, that is a needle in a haystack. That is definitely a place I would recommend anybody go to. I thought it was perfectly safe. It's visa free. Almost everybody speaks Russian, so if you are learning Russian, that's an amazing country to go to, but that is just my personal thoughts. Georgia, again, another beautiful country. It is definitely a growing country, but if you've seen the news or anything, there's definitely a lot of turmoil, like fights and stuff breaking out in the parliament. There was graffiti all over, trash all over. Again, I enjoyed the country. I spent, like a week and a half, something there in Tbilisi, pretty much. I did go outside to Batumi and Rustavi and some other places in Georgia. As far as the stands go, they're definitely a bit more poor than the rest of Russia. I would say the politics and the political setting is pretty similar to that of Russia in a lot of these countries. From what I've seen, it would probably be more like that non-Moscow, St. Petersburg type Russia, albeit probably a little bit more poor. However, the people, from what I've heard, are extremely friendly. There's a lot of things to do. It's a vast area. It's mostly unexplored. You're not going to run into a lot of tourists. If you go out to like a Kyrgyzstan or even like Tajikistan's actually on my bucket list, big time. I would love to go to Tajikistan. Russian is widely used. It's a lingua franca of the area. Extremely useful. You can get almost anywhere with it. There are some closed, like Turkmenistan's pretty closed off, but that would probably be the exception to actually all the post-Soviet countries that you might have some difficulties actually getting into. I don't think you would have any difficulties getting into Russia as long as you have your paperwork straight. So that is my thoughts on everything. Again, I tried to keep this to like 10 minutes. It looks like it's going to run a bit over, but that is pretty much it. So thank you, and das vidanya.